I came back from a 2-week work trip, looking forward to a warm welcome from my wife, Kamala. It was late evening when I pulled up to the driveway, and the lights in the living room were dim, casting shadows through the blinds. Usually, Kamala would be waiting up for me with a glass of wine or a cozy dinner, her way of welcoming me back home. But this time, things felt different. As I stepped through the door, I noticed that the familiar scent of our home was overpowered by something floral and sweet, an expensive perfume Kamala never wore. The house was almost eerily quiet, save for the soft, low hum of music coming from the kitchen. With every step, I could feel the unease building in my chest. Kamala appeared in the doorway, a little surprised to see me. She was dressed up, wearing a new dress that hugged her in ways I hadn't seen in months. She was silent, her eyes darting toward the kitchen, and I knew instantly that something was off. My mind was already spinning, but I kept my composure. "Hey," I said, trying to read her face. "You didn't know I'd be back tonight?" Kamala smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I thought you'd be back tomorrow," she replied, her voice strained. In the silence that followed, a sound caught my ear, a shuffling noise, as if someone was in the other room. My heart thudded. I glanced toward the kitchen, and for a moment, she hesitated, her face betraying a hint of panic. I moved past her, toward the kitchen, where I found a half-empty bottle of champagne, 2 glasses still holding the remnants of a toast, and the unmistakable scent of cologne that wasn't mine. I turned around, and Kamala was right behind me, her face pale, hands fidgeting as she tried to form words. Before she could get a single syllable out, I heard the faint creak of a floorboard in the hallway. My pulse quickened, and without another word, I walked straight toward the source of the sound. That's when he stepped out, a tall, lean man, dressed in a way that screamed confidence and a kind of casual disregard. He looked at me with a mix of defiance and guilt. I didn't recognize him immediately, but his face felt familiar, like a figure from a half-remembered dream. Kamala opened her mouth to explain, her voice a shaky whisper. "This is Ryan. He's my friend." Her words came out like broken fragments, each one a slap in the face. "He stopped by for a drink," she stammered. "A drink," I repeated, my voice steady. I scanned the room, noting the candlelit table set for 2. "Just a drink, huh?" My sarcasm cut through the air, thick with tension. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Kamala as if waiting for her to rescue him from the scene. He looked at me, offering a reluctant nod. "Sorry, man. I didn't know you'd be back tonight." Ignoring him, I turned back to Kamala, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Kamala, how long has this been going on?" Kamala's face crumbled, and she finally spoke in a low, trembling voice. It just happened. I don't know how to explain it. You've been away so much, and I felt so alone." She looked away, the shame obvious, yet her explanation felt rehearsed, shallow. A bitter laugh escaped me. "Alone? Really? And this guy, he's supposed to be what? The answer to that?" Ryan finally found his voice, taking a step toward me. "Listen, man, it's not what it looks like. I didn't mean to come between you two. All right? This was a mistake." "A mistake?" I snapped, my anger finally boiling over. "You think this is something you could just walk away from?" Kamala grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back. "Please, let's just talk about this, okay? Let's sit down. I didn't want it to end up like this." But I couldn't listen to her. I turned on my heel, ignoring both of them, storming out of the kitchen and back toward the door. I needed air. I needed to get out before I said something I'd regret. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a shock, grounding me. I knew I couldn't just let this slide, couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen what I had. This wasn't a one-time mistake. Kamala had made a choice, and now I had to decide how I was going to respond. But I also knew something else. This wasn't over. The next day, I returned home determined to confront Kamala again, to get the full story, every ugly detail. But when I walked inside, something else caught my eye. On the counter was a note with an address scrawled on it in Kamala's handwriting. The address was on the other side of town, in an area I knew well, a neighborhood filled with upscale condos, a favorite for young professionals who preferred the convenience of downtown life. My mind was racing. Who was this address meant for? And why was it sitting out here, in plain view, as if she hadn't even bothered to hide it? Kamala walked into the room just as I picked up the note. She froze when she saw it in my hand, her face turning pale. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just some mistake. There was a whole secret life attached to this. Who lives here? I demanded, holding the note up. Kamala hesitated, looking down as if weighing her words. It's Ryan's place, she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. I felt a fresh wave of anger and disgust. So they weren't just meeting here in our home. She was going to his place too. The betrayal felt deeper, sharper. And you've been seeing him there too? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Kamala nodded slowly, eyes downcast. It was only a few times, she murmured, as if that would somehow lessen the blow. Only a few times? I echoed, my voice filled with disbelief. Kamala, do you have any idea what this looks like? You've been sneaking around with this guy, lying to me, and now I'm supposed to believe it's just a few times? This isn't some one-night stand. You've built a whole relationship with him. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but I pulled back. Please, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I was lonely, you were away, and he was just there. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. So that's your excuse? I was gone. So you just found someone else? She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came. The silence between us was thick, heavy with everything that had been left unsaid. And that's when I made up my mind. All right, I said, breaking the silence. Let's go. Kamala looked at me, confused. Go? Go where? To Ryan's place, I said, holding up the address. I want to see exactly where you've been spending all those nights you claimed were for girls' night or late work meetings. You're going to show me. Her eyes widened in shock, but I could see the hint of panic there, too. She stammered, I don't think that's a good idea. Too bad. We're going. Now. Reluctantly, she nodded, knowing she had no choice. She grabbed her coat, and we walked out to the car in silence. The drive across town felt surreal, filled with a tension so thick it was suffocating. Every so often, I'd glance at her out of the corner of my eye, but she kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, as if bracing herself for what was to come. We pulled up to the address, a sleek modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows. My stomach twisted at the sight of it. Realizing this was where she'd been coming time and time again, without me knowing, I parked the car, and without waiting for her, I got out and strode toward the entrance. She followed a few steps behind, her footsteps hesitant. We made our way up the stairs to the second floor, where she pointed out his door, her face a mask of dread. Open it, I said, my voice cold. She fumbled with the key, which she somehow had, and unlocked the door. I pushed it open, and there it was, a picture-perfect, modern condo, sleek and spotless, as if untouched by the mess it had caused in my life. I walked in, taking in the sterile, impersonal decor, trying to imagine her here, trying to picture the life she'd been leading behind my back. And then something caught my eye, a framed photo on the coffee table. I picked it up, and my stomach dropped. It was a picture of Kamala and Ryan, smiling together in what looked like a beachside restaurant, drinks in hand, gazing into each other's eyes like a pair of love-struck teenagers. The rage I'd been holding back finally broke free. This is what you've been doing. I held up the photo. You didn't even try to hide this. Kamala's face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch, her hands covering her face. I didn't know he kept that picture, she whispered, as if that somehow made it better. I dropped the photo back onto the table, feeling the full weight of her betrayal. But as I looked around, something else caught my attention, a second set of keys on the kitchen counter, next to an envelope with my name on it. I picked up the envelope, turning it over in my hands, my name staring back at me in bold, precise handwriting. Kamala's face went even paler when she saw what I was holding, but she said nothing. I tore it open, expecting some kind of weak apology, an attempt to rationalize her actions. But what I found was something far more unsettling. Inside was a single sheet of paper. At the top, typed in stark black letters, was a list of bank accounts and assets, ones I recognized, except the balances didn't match what I knew. They were drastically lower. My gaze flicked back to Kamala, and I could see the fear in her eyes now, deeper than before. Kamala, what is this? I demanded, holding up the paper. She hesitated, glancing away. It is not what you think, she stammered, but her voice held no conviction. Oh, isn't it? I spat, feeling the anger boiling over once more. Because it looks like someone's been siphoning money out of our accounts, and I doubt it was me. Her silence spoke louder than any explanation. I looked back at the paper, scanning it for more clues, and that's when I noticed the final entry, a transfer made just 3 days ago to an account in Ryan's name. You've been giving him money? You're funding this affair? The disbelief in my voice must have been evident because Kamala's shoulders slumped, as though she knew she couldn't keep up the lie any longer. It's not like that, she whispered, barely audible. Ryan, he has some debts, and he needed help. I was only trying to... To what? I interrupted, incredulous. To bankrupt us? To hand over everything we've worked for to this guy you barely even know? Her face twisted, and I could see something else there, something that wasn't quite remorse. You don't understand. He needed me. You don't know what it's like to feel needed like that. Her voice broke, and she looked away, as if that was supposed to make me understand. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Needed? I laughed bitterly. Kamala, you're destroying our life for a man who's using you, and you're too blind to see it. She started to protest, but then a noise from down the hall caught our attention. The bedroom door opened, and Ryan stepped out, his face a mix of shock and annoyance. What's going on? He demanded, his gaze flicking between Kamala and me, clearly thrown off by the confrontation he'd walked into. I didn't waste a second. What's going on, Ryan? Is that I'm finding out just how deep your little scheme goes. I waved the paper at him. Were you really planning on milking her dry? Because that's what it looks like from here. Ryan raised his hands defensively, smirking as if he found the whole situation amusing. Look, man, I don't know what you think is happening here, but Kamala and I were in love. She's with me because you've neglected her, left her alone for years. All I did was fill the void you left behind. His words were like gasoline on a fire. Fill the void, I echoed, the anger nearly choking me. You're just a leech. You're here for whatever you can take, and Kamala's too blind to see it. But I'm ending it now. Ryan scoffed, taking a step closer, his smirk fading. I don't think you understand. Kamala isn't going anywhere. She's here because she wants to be with me. So if anyone's leaving, it's you. Kamala looked between us, her face etched with panic, as if realizing just how far things had spiraled. But before she could say a word, I turned and headed for the door. Enjoy while you can, both of you, I said over my shoulder, because this little fantasy of yours is about to come crashing down. As I walked out, I heard Kamala calling after me, her voice desperate, but I didn't turn back. A few days after I stormed out of Ryan's condo, I was still reeling, trying to wrap my head around the betrayal, the lies, the money siphoned out of our accounts. I spent the nights on my brother's couch, replaying the confrontation over and over. But just when I thought I'd seen the worst of it, Kamala texted me out of the blue, asking to talk. I wanted to ignore her, let her sit in the silence she'd earned, but part of me needed to hear her explain herself, needed to know what could possibly drive someone to unravel everything we'd built together. So, against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a nearby park where we'd often walk together on Saturday mornings. Kamala was already there, sitting on a bench by the water, clutching her coat tightly around her. Her face softened when she saw me approach, but I kept my expression guarded. She wasted no time, diving right into the heart of her proposal. Look, she started, her voice shaky. I've been thinking about us, about everything, and I realized something. We've been together a long time, and people change. Maybe we can change together. I folded my arms, biting back a bitter retort. Is that supposed to be an apology, Kamala? She shook her head. It's more than that. I know I hurt you, but what I'm saying is maybe it doesn't have to end. Maybe we could open things up. The words hung in the air between us, surreal and absurd. Open things up? I repeated, incredulous. You think the answer to your betrayal is for us to be together, but also with other people? You're out of your mind. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Just hear me out, she pleaded. I know it sounds crazy, but a lot of couples make it work. You'd be free to see other people too, and we could still be us. I laughed, cold and bitter. Free to see other people? Kamala, I'm not interested in other people. I thought we were enough. I thought I was enough. She flinched, the desperation growing in her eyes. But don't you see? It's not about you not being enough. It's about expanding what we have, about exploring something new together. I know you think it's selfish, but selfish. I interrupted, my voice rising. Kamala, you've already lied to me, drained our accounts for some guy you barely know, and now you want me to believe this is about expanding our love? It's about you wanting your cake and eating it too. She pursed her lips, steeling herself. I've done some reading, and a lot of people say that open marriages make things stronger. We'd have trust, honesty, boundaries. I would tell you everything. No more sneaking around. I stared at her, the disbelief turning into something else. Anger, frustration, a twisted sort of heartbreak. Kamala, this isn't some alternative lifestyle experiment. This is a disaster you've already created. You've lied, cheated, and now you want to play house with me while keeping this Ryan guy on the side? Kamala took a breath, her expression growing sharper. This is a chance to start fresh, she argued, to redefine what we want together. You don't have to say yes, but don't just dismiss it. I shook my head, disgusted. I have no interest in redefining anything with you if this is what you call marriage. You've already shown me how much you value trust and honesty. She opened her mouth to respond, but I stopped her. Do you even know who you are anymore, Kamala? Or are you so caught up in your little fantasy that you don't even see what this has done? Her face softened, as if she wanted to reach out, to reel me back in, but it was too late. She might have convinced herself that this was some enlightened way forward, but I wasn't buying it. You want to be with him? Fine. Be with him, I said, standing up. But I won't be part of this circus you're proposing. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, not a playground. Kamala's eyes filled with something between anger and desperation. So, that's it? You're really just going to walk away? I met her gaze, unflinching. No, Kamala, you're the one who walked away. And with that, I turned my back on her and left. 1 month later, I picked up the phone and dialed Kamala's number, ready to play a new game, one where I'd be in control this time. I had spent weeks agonizing over her betrayal, replaying her absurd proposal for an open marriage. It took a while, but I eventually realized that Kamala's request could be exactly what I needed to set things right my way. When she answered, her voice was cautious but hopeful. Hello, it's me, I said flatly. I've been thinking, and maybe you're right. Maybe we could try the open arrangement you suggested. Her silence was palpable, and then she let out a shocked, almost disbelieving laugh. Are you serious? I didn't think you'd ever call back. I kept my voice steady, hiding the satisfaction brewing beneath. I'm serious. If you think this will help, then maybe it's worth a try. Let's make it work for both of us. Kamala's relief was obvious, her excitement barely contained. I can't believe this. Thank you, really. We can set boundaries, be open about everything, and... Yeah, I interrupted, forcing a bit of warmth into my tone. We'll take it one step at a time. Let's meet up and work out the details. The thrill of her excitement only fueled my plan. She thought I was finally accepting her vision, that I was going to compromise, to forgive. Little did she know this was about reclaiming my dignity and dealing out justice, not about making peace. We met at a cafe a couple of days later. Kamala was practically glowing, looking at me with a mix of gratitude and, surprisingly, admiration. She probably thought she'd won me over. We settled into a quiet booth, and she leaned forward, eager to map out her new idea of marriage. So, let's set some boundaries, she began, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. I was thinking we could both be open about where we're going and who we're seeing. Full transparency. No sneaking around. Just freedom. I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering her words. Agreed. Transparency, no lying. I'll let you know if I meet someone new, and you'll do the same, right? Of course, she nodded eagerly, looking genuinely relieved. I think this could actually make us stronger. You'll see. You might even find you like it. Oh, I already do, I said, letting a small smile slip through. And maybe we could set some ground rules about how we, interact with each other's partners. Kamala blinked, caught off guard. You mean like what? Nothing major, I replied casually. Just that if I meet someone, she could come over to the house. I mean, you and Ryan have already used our home, right? A flicker of guilt passed over her face, but she quickly masked it with a nod. Sure, that's only fair. If you meet someone, bring her over. I understand. Perfect, I said, my mind already racing with plans. Then it sounds like we're all set. We clinked our coffee mugs together as though toasting to some mutual understanding. But I knew that while Kamala thought she'd just reached a harmonious new arrangement, she was actually walking straight into the trap I'd laid. In the weeks that followed, I wasted no time. Kamala flaunted her freedom with Ryan, bringing him to our house, even introducing him to friends and neighbors under the guise of our new understanding. It didn't take long before I realized that the people in our social circle were starting to look at me differently, some with pity, others with judgment. They saw me as the fool in this arrangement. But that was about to change. I started going out, meeting new people, always careful to keep Kamala informed like we agreed. At first, I kept it low-key, a casual date here, a dinner there. Kamala seemed thrilled that I was embracing the lifestyle, but she didn't realize I was carefully setting the stage. One evening, I arranged to meet up with Marissa, a stunning attorney I'd met at a networking event. She was sharp, witty, and most importantly, had zero tolerance for nonsense. I explained my situation to her over dinner, and when I mentioned my open marriage, she immediately saw through it. "So, let me get this straight," Marissa said, arching an eyebrow. "You're doing this to get back at your wife? And you want me to help?" I gave her a half smile. "If you're up for it, I won't pretend it's noble, but she's torn our life apart, and this is the only way I see to get some balance." Marissa leaned back, intrigued. "All right, I can't say I approve, but if she's really as oblivious as you say, then yeah, let's shake things up." Over the next few weeks, I carefully let Kamala catch bits and pieces of my new relationship with Marissa. I'd leave my phone out with text on the screen, photos of us on social media, subtle but undeniable. Soon enough, Kamala started asking questions. "You're really seeing her often," she commented one night, a hint of jealousy creeping into her voice. I shrugged, keeping my tone neutral. We agreed, right? Full transparency. And yeah, Marissa's great. She's really supportive. Kamala tried to smile, but I could see the unease in her eyes. "I didn't think you'd get so serious so fast." I shrugged, letting her stew in the very arrangement she'd wanted. Guess I was just waiting for the right person. The final act came on a Saturday night, when I invited Marissa over to the house. Kamala wasn't expecting it, and I could tell from the moment Marissa walked in that Kamala was rattled. She tried to be polite, but her discomfort was obvious. Ryan, who was over as usual, looked equally thrown off, clearly unprepared to share the stage. We sat down for dinner, a tense, awkward meal where Kamala and Ryan exchanged worried glances while Marissa and I casually laughed, leaning into each other like a comfortable couple. Afterward, we retreated to the living room where Marissa and I sat together, the atmosphere charged with tension. Kamala finally couldn't take it anymore. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she asked, her voice tight as she gestured for me to follow her into the hallway. I followed, feigning confusion. "What's up?" She closed the door behind us, her expression taut. This isn't what I expected. I mean, I thought we'd have fun, but seeing you with her like that..." "Oh, you mean like how you and Ryan are?" I replied, feigning innocence. "I thought this was what you wanted." Her eyes filled with frustration and maybe even regret. "I didn't think it would feel like this. Like you're actually with her." I leaned in close, my voice low. "Funny how that works, huh? You wanted an open marriage, Kamala. Now we have one." I let that sink in, savoring the mix of shock and shame on her face. And with that, I walked back into the living room, back to Marissa, leaving Kamala in the hallway, reeling from the reality she'd set in motion but could no longer control. It was far from over, but for the first time, I was the one holding the cards. Over the next few weeks, I kept up the act, carefully orchestrating moments that made Kamala question everything about her so-called open marriage. Every date with Marissa became a calculated performance. Every public display of affection, a small dagger twisted in Kamala's heart. The tables had turned completely, and Kamala's jealousy was becoming more and more visible. It wasn't long before she confronted me. One night, I came home after spending the day with Marissa, and Kamala was waiting for me, sitting stiffly at the kitchen table. Her face was drawn, her hands clasped tightly, as if she'd been steeling herself for this conversation all day. "We need to talk," she said, her voice strained. I took a seat across from her, letting a look of mild curiosity cross my face. "All right, what's on your mind?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting together, before finally blurting it out. "I think we need to reconsider this open marriage." I leaned back, feigning surprise. "Reconsider it? I thought this was exactly what you wanted." Kamala's face fell. "I thought it would be good for us, a way to, I don't know, feel free without losing each other. But seeing you with Marissa, it's not the same." "Not the same," I echoed, a sarcastic edge creeping into my voice. Didn't seem to bother you when you and Ryan were sneaking around behind my back. That's different, she insisted, flustered. We have history. We care about each other. This thing with Marissa, it's like you're just rubbing it in my face. And it hurts. Oh, it hurts, does it? I laughed, cold and bitter. Funny, because that's exactly how I felt watching you cozy up with Ryan while you drained our accounts. She looked down, visibly shamed, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. But I reminded myself of everything she'd put me through. The lies, the betrayal, the utter disregard for our life together. I wasn't about to let her off the hook so easily. Maybe it's time we end things with other people and just go back to being us, she said quietly, looking up at me with a pleading expression. I shook my head. Oh no, Kamala. You opened this door, and now you want to close it just because things aren't going your way? That's not how it works. She looked stunned, like she hadn't expected me to refuse. So, you're choosing Marissa over me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. You wanted freedom, right? That's what you called it. Freedom. And I'm just taking you at your word. She looked like she was about to say something more, but at that moment, my phone buzzed with a message from Marissa, and I let a smile slip across my face, making sure Kamala saw it. Her expression crumbled, but I didn't look away. Actually, I've got plans tonight, I said, standing up and grabbing my coat. Don't wait up. For the next few weeks, I played the role of the doting, committed partner to Marissa. That is, I made sure Kamala saw every photo, every post, and every moment I shared with her. Kamala's facade of calm and acceptance shattered a little more each day, her jealousy boiling just beneath the surface. She started lashing out, making snide comments about Marissa whenever she could, calling her names, even trying to belittle my time with her. But I took it all in stride. My responses short and controlled, knowing that every word only deepened the resentment building between us. Finally, one evening, after a particularly tense week, Kamala broke. She cornered me in the kitchen, her face flushed with anger and desperation. This has to stop, she shouted, her voice shaking. You can't just keep throwing her in my face. Throwing her in your face? I replied, raising an eyebrow. Kamala, this was your idea. You thought we could just open our marriage, bring in other people, and everything would magically be fine. I thought it would be different, she spat, her eyes blazing. I didn't think you'd get so serious with someone else. Serious? I laughed bitterly. This is exactly what you wanted, isn't it? No more boundaries, no more commitments, just freedom. So that's what I'm giving you. Her face fell, her anger melting into something else. Something that looked a lot like regret. Maybe I made a mistake, she whispered almost to herself. I stepped closer, keeping my voice cold and controlled. You're damn right you made a mistake, Kamala. And now, you're living with the consequences. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of her decisions settling on her. She looked away, silent, defeated, realizing that there was no going back to what we once had. The final blow came a few days later. I kept one last card up my sleeve, and now it was time to play it. One evening, as Kamala came home, she found me waiting with a stack of paperwork on the table. Divorce papers. She froze when she saw them, her face going pale. What is this? She stammered, though the answer was obvious. It's over, Kamala, I said calmly, gesturing to the papers. This was never about freedom. It was about your selfishness, your lack of respect for everything we built. And I'm done. Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head, as if trying to deny what was happening. Please, we can fix this. I'll end things with Ryan. We can go back to the way things were, I swear. I met her gaze, unflinching. You killed the way things were the moment you lied to me, betrayed me, and made a fool out of everything we had. You wanted freedom, Kamala, and now you have it. She tried to argue, to plead, but her words fell flat. I'd already made my decision. She signed the papers that night, realizing too late that she'd gambled everything and lost. After I filed for divorce, Kamala's life began to unravel faster than I'd anticipated. She put on a brave face, trying to act like she was fine, but it wasn't long before I started hearing from mutual friends, picking up pieces of her downward spiral. At first, she tried to keep up appearances. She continued seeing Ryan, clinging to him as if he could somehow replace what she'd thrown away. But Ryan, as I'd expected, had only ever been there for the thrill, the excitement of sneaking around. When Kamala's mood started to sour, her once bright enthusiasm replaced by bouts of anger, sadness, and regret, he began pulling away. Her messages to me became sporadic, sometimes pleading, other times accusing, as she tried to find some way to make sense of the chaos she'd created. Then came the night I got a text from her. 3 simple words that carried more weight than I expected. "Can we talk?" I knew I should ignore it, let her sit with the consequences of her choices, but something in me, maybe a shred of the old loyalty, wouldn't let me. So, against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a small diner on the edge of town, a place we used to go during simpler times. She looked different when I arrived, almost unrecognizable. Her once vibrant face was gaunt, dark circles under her eyes that no makeup could cover. Her hair, usually so carefully done, looked dull limp, as if she hadn't bothered with it in days. She gave me a weak smile, barely holding it together as she sat across from me, twisting her hands in her lap. "Thanks for meeting me," she whispered, her voice unsteady. I nodded, saying nothing, letting the silence settle between us as she struggled to find her words. It's been hard," she started, her eyes darting everywhere, but at me. After everything." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "And what did you expect, Kamala? You wanted freedom. You got it." She winced, biting her lip, as if my words were a physical blow. "I thought I did. I thought I was doing what was best for both of us. But I was wrong." Her voice broke, and she looked down, her hands trembling. "Ryan, he left. Said he couldn't handle the way things are. Said I was too much." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. "Too much? Now that's rich." She flinched, the pain evident on her face, but I wasn't about to coddle her. Not after everything she'd put me through. "Do you know how many times I've tried to call you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought maybe we could fix things." I shook my head, a mix of pity and anger bubbling up inside me. "You broke it, Kamala. You don't get to come back just because things didn't work out the way you wanted." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of her regret. She was crumbling, the reality of her actions hitting her harder than she'd ever anticipated. "I know I made a mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "I know I ruined everything, but please, just give me another chance. I'll make it right, I swear." I looked away, the anger melting into something colder, sharper. "Kamala, you didn't just hurt me. You shattered everything we built, everything I believed in, and you did it for a man who left the moment things got tough. What kind of person does that?" Her shoulders slumped, and she buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. The sight of her, broken and defeated, should have given me some kind of satisfaction, but all I felt was a hollow sense of finality. "Please," she whispered through her tears. "I don't know who I am anymore. I'm lost and I don't know how to fix this." I watched her, a strange mix of sadness and pity twisting in my chest. I'd loved this woman once, given her everything, but now, all I saw was a shell of who she'd been, someone grasping at pieces of a life she'd willingly thrown away. "There's nothing left to fix," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "You made your choice, Kamala. Now you have to live with it." She looked up, her face streaked with tears, searching my eyes for some sign of hope, but I didn't give her any. I stood up, sliding my chair back with a scrape, and placed a few bills on the table to cover our coffee. As I turned to leave, she reached out, grabbing my hand. "Please don't leave me like this." I pulled my hand away, meeting her gaze one last time. "Goodbye, Kamala." Several months passed without a word from Kamala, and I started to believe she'd finally accepted that our marriage, and everything we'd built, was over. But just as I was getting comfortable, thinking the drama was behind me, I received a notice in the mail. Kamala was suing me for half of everything. Our savings, the house, even my investments. She claimed she was entitled to it all, arguing that our open marriage had been mutual and that I had abandoned her afterward. The audacity was staggering. Here she was, trying to take me to the cleaners after she had lied, cheated, and squandered our life together for a fling that had left her in ruins. If she wanted a fight, she was about to get one. I immediately contacted my lawyer, an old friend who specialized in high-stakes divorces. He listened to the entire sordid story, shaking his head in disbelief by the end. "This is a desperate move," he said, a hint of a smirk on his face. She thinks she can manipulate the system to get what she wants, but she doesn't know who she's up against. The lawsuit dragged on for weeks, each new development more absurd than the last. Kamala's attorney, a big-shot lawyer known for his aggressive tactics, tried every trick in the book. He claimed emotional distress, abandonment, even spun the open marriage as my idea, painting me as some heartless husband who'd forced her into a lifestyle she didn't want. But while Kamala and her lawyer were busy building their web of lies, I was preparing my own case. I had evidence of her infidelity, photos of her and Ryan, even bank records showing her siphoning money out of our joint accounts to cover expenses for her secret life. Every shred of documentation was a nail in her case, and my lawyer wielded each one like a weapon. Kamala, however, didn't know when to quit. I watched from across the courtroom as she sat there, looking worn down, drained. She'd sunk every last penny into this lawsuit, convinced that if she could win, she could come out with something, maybe even rebuild her life on the ruins of mine. But as the days passed, it became clear that her case was falling apart. One afternoon, her lawyer made one last desperate attempt, trying to paint her as the victim. He pulled out a letter she'd written to me months ago, one where she'd begged for forgiveness, pleaded for us to try again. He read it aloud, his voice trembling with mock sympathy, hoping to sway the judge. But it was too late. My lawyer countered immediately, presenting evidence of her affair, her own emails with Ryan, detailing plans to meet up, make purchases with joint funds, even vague plans to try to secure a future without me. The contrast was devastating. Kamala's letter, once meant to garner sympathy, now only served as a reminder of her manipulations, the way she twisted the truth to serve her own ends. By the time my lawyer finished his closing arguments, Kamala looked hollowed out, defeated. The judge, after deliberating, ruled almost entirely in my favor. Kamala walked away with nothing but the mounting debt from her legal bills and the grim realization that she'd lost every last piece of our former life. The house, the savings, and even the investments remained in my hands. Outside the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of her slumped on a bench, staring blankly at the floor, her lawyer long gone. I knew that every penny she'd fought so hard for had now gone to him, leaving her with nothing but bills, debt, and a painful sense of regret. Her once bright future, the life she'd gambled everything for, was in shambles. As I walked past her, she looked up, her eyes filled with a desperate, haunted look. For a brief moment, she opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. What could she possibly say? Apologies and pleas for forgiveness would be hollow now. She had tried to take everything from me, and now she was the one left with nothing. I didn't stop, didn't even offer her a final word. Kamala had made her bed, and now she was lying in it alone. The fight was over. She'd wanted freedom, and now she had it. No marriage, no money, no support. Just an empty life of her own making. And as I walked away, feeling the weight of it all finally lift, I knew one thing. I was free. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. New cheating wife stories tomorrow.